everyone. Thank you for joining in. I'm going to allow a few more minutes for other users to join. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So as always, thank you everyone for joining in. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to enter them into the chat or the Q&A box, and I'll be more than happy to spend some time at the end of the campfire to go over any questions. I'm Lexi. I cover over our customer success and support. I've been with Aprico for over a year and a half now, and in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 4 years now. I might need to update this. All right. On the agenda today, we're going to discuss and dive into one of the key features within Mission Control in regards to expense management. And what that covers is exploring the expense approval options, as well as the options on logging expenses. We'll go over the difference between logging project expenses and non-project expenses, and then how to relate to like purchase orders or budget items. And then lastly, we'll go over how to approve expenses, how to set this up, where these fields are located, and so on. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the demo. So from the Mission Control console, you are actually going to create your expenses from the progress pad, not the launch pad where you create other records and so on. So this is one of the locations that you can log your expenses. I do want to note that from this component that this takes you to, which we're going to open up in a second, you won't have the same option to add your picture or receipt of your expense. That'll need to be done once the expense has been created. You'll just navigate to that expense record and then add the photo and so on. There's also the log expense action in the utility bar at the bottom of your Mission Control app. So if you use a different app with your company, you might not see this at the bottom, but this can be added to the utility bar as well as other pages and things like that. This component can also be used on your Salesforce mobile app as well. So just to open up this component, you can relate your expense to projects, or if it's a non-project expense, you don't have to relate it, as well as purchase orders and milestones. You'll notice the budget item option is not on this display here. And then at the bottom, you'll be able to browse and upload your receipt to this expense. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out the expense log. All right, so from this expense display, you'll see who the expense is incurred by. So you will need to do this for one user at a time. And once this person is selected, you'll also see the mileage rate that is assigned on their role record. So I'll take you to Mick Fanning's role records just so we can see what that looks like. All right, so under the expense settings, his mileage rate is defined here, as well as the expense approver. So you do want to note that the expense approver can be marked on the role record. And then we'll get into some other options in a little bit. So going back to this, to create a project related expense, you do want to click the search icon here and select a project that shows up or that's related to this expense. If you have any purchase order items to relate this to, and they've already been created and related to this project, then you can go ahead and search it. So ahead of time, I went ahead and created a purchase order for this expense. Otherwise, you can also, so I'm going to relate it to this purchase order, and I will also relate it to this budget item that has been created on my project already. So this expense is going to be related to the installation portion of this project. You can specify the source. So has this been paid on a personal card, a company card, cash, or via a purchase order? We're going to put purchase order here and then select the date. That happened yesterday. We're going ahead. You can define the cost amount, cost tax. If there is any markup required, I have gone ahead and specified the markup percentage for this project. So I wouldn't need to add a custom markup percentage here. All I would need to do is mark that the markup is required. If there was any mileage to log here, you would just put the distance, and then the amount claimed would go ahead and populate, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and save this expense. Another location that you can log expenses would be directly on your project under the expense tab. So this will give you a summary of the anticipated project expenses, your actuals, and your actual billable and non-billable. And then you'll see that we have some expense records that are pending, some are submitted. You'll see all of the related expenses for this project. So because this, I selected the save button on the expense page instead of the save and submit button, this expense is now pending. So it will only go to the approver when it is considered submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and edit that. And okay, so just while we're on this record, notice the fields here in the approval section of this expense. So you can manage if the role manager is required to approve the expense, or if the project owner is required to approve the expense. So what I'm going to do is show you the project record and what is required for this project. So under the expense information for this project, we see that 10% markup, any anticipated project expenses, anything that's pending, and then who is required to approve this expense. So I can select that the project owner would be the one who approves this, which is Alexi already, or if the role manager is required to approve this, which would be the same person as well. Okay, so going back to that expense, you'll see a couple of different things here. The role manager is required to approve this record, so you can see who that is, which is Lexi, the person assigned on that role record. And then these fields will automatically update that, give you the information on who is required to approve this record. So if you are the project owner and you are required to approve the record, you'll have to go to the project owner approval status, not the approval status on the expense. If you are the role manager, it's going to be the same. You are going to be required to edit the role manager approval status. And when both of those are marked approved, then your approval status will be marked approved and the approval date stamp will update. Okay. So I'm not going to approve it from this screen. I'm just going to save this with the submitted status. If you are an approver for an expense and a user has submitted an expense, which would be Mick, that we've done today, there is a list view on the expense object, which already has a list for expenses requiring your approval. If you don't know where your expense object is, you can search in the main menu here for the expense object. Okay, that's how I got to the screen here. Okay, so I am the role manager and I'm going to go ahead and update the role manager approval status and save. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the project and what has updated for that expense. All right, so now you can see that the actual expenses has updated on the project. The status for both of those expenses has now changed to approved. And on the budget item that we've related that to, the expense should show up as well. Okay, so now we can see that the completed expense that we did relate to the budget item has rolled up as a completed expense and will then be calculated within your billable and costs budget on your project. All right. Lastly, another thing, when you go to the expense object, you can also create new expenses directly from here. This will give you all of the fields for your expense, depending on your page layout. So I can specify the project, the phase of the project, or the milestone. Your purchase order item can be related here, as well as your budget item, who incurred the expense, the date, and so on. And then once that record is created, you can then go ahead and upload your receipt. So if I go to this expense, I can add it in your the files or the notes and attachments for this. So just going back to that summary, once your expenses are approved, if you're doing billing on your project, that will then roll up to the related billing event for that phase of the project. And then we'll also show under the detail for the financial information on the project related to the expenses. So you can see the actual expenses has now been updated since that's been approved. All right. Now I'm going to turn things over to you guys. If you have any questions in regards to expenses or anything, any other questions in regards to mission control. All right, I'll stay on for a few more minutes in case anyone has any questions. Okay, we have a question coming in. I will unmute you.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I've got a question. So I like the consulting administrator. So I'm the one that will create roles every time when there's a new consultant that's joining the team, right? So it also I'm the one that's responsible for approving their expenses. So when I created the role, I did say Dimakato will be the one that's approving. But when they capture their timesheets, when they save and submit, it approves the time, not the timesheet, sorry, the expenses. When they capture it, it approves itself automatically. Yes, it comes to me. I see it when I pull the entire report month end to submit to finance, but I don't approve anymore. I can't reject, I can't approve, but they all come to me as approved. I don't know, maybe it's a field that I did not click, or maybe just, I don't know.
So what you'll want to do is on your projects that they are relating the expenses to, you'll want to make sure that the role manager expense approval is required. So that's going to always send those expenses to you. Are they
Okay, so
also creating like non-project expenses?
they do that as well. But I've created like a milestone that says expenses where they can capture expenses there. But as soon as they capture it as expenses, I can't approve. Like it doesn't prompt me to approve.
Okay, so I'm guessing that the role manager expense approval required field is not marked true on your project. So you'll want to make sure that this is marked. And then on your expense, you'll want to make sure that you have the fields on your page layout in regards to approval, which would be your role manager approval status field. If you want them to see who their approver is, then you can put the role manager approval on the screen. There's also a couple of other fields like the role manager current user. That's just telling me that since it's marked true that I am the one that approves this expense record, and then any rejection comments and so on. This would be the field that you'll need to mark approved. So I would most likely check your page layout to make sure that field is on there.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is there any other users that might have some questions? I can also show you one more time. So looking back at my roles, oh, that's not what I was trying to see. Colin also has me as the expense approver. So he was to log a new expense. And it's related to this project that had that setting that the role manager is required. So let's say it's incurred by Colin. We're going to relate it to a budget item from, let's say today. There is a markup required. Payments, it's outstanding, and he used his company card. Oh, and we're going to submit this. Oh, forgot to put a cost tax. All right, so now it's submitted. I'm going to go ahead and check that it's requiring my approval. And you can see that it's now been submitted for my approval. So I'll just need to change this to approved and save. Okay, now I can go back to that project and see that that expense has now been added to the actuals. It's been approved and we'll roll up to the project financials. So another way to do this is I'm the project owner. So let's go ahead and mark that the project owner is required to approve the expense. I'm going to save. And now if, let's say Chris was to submit a, oh, I'm in the wrong one, log expenses. So let's say Chris did this expense. We're going to relate it to that purchase order again. Use cash. And then we're going to add the cost. Let's also put some distance in here. And then we're going to save and submit. So again, saving will have that expense go to pending. Save and submit will require the expense to be approved. Okay. Okay, so it's now showing that I need to, since I am the project owner and the role manager, I will need to approve both of these fields before the approval status will update to approved. So let's approve those, save, and you'll see it automatically updated to approved. You'll also see the amount for the distance that I put in has updated for that user. And then again, going to the project and viewing the project financials, this has now been updated as well. If you also have any non-expense related questions, I'll be happy to answer those as well. All right, I will remain on the call until 2 more minutes, which would bring us to the half hour. In case anyone has any last second questions. If you have any suggestions for other, if you have any other questions or recommendations for other Cosmo campfires, like there's other features you want more in-depth breakdown on, then just go ahead and put that in the comments as well, and I will be more than happy to set that up. All right, feel free to get in touch if you have any support requests. Those can be sent to support@aprika.com. We also have a few links here to the user guide, training videos, our knowledge base, release notes, learning portal, and then our Trailhead group. If you have any questions pop up, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a wonderful day.